Welcome to the Health and Wealth Power Hour, the podcast that provides you with the knowledge and insights you need to achieve physical, mental, and financial well-being. I'm your host, Arlen Pickett, a business consultant who's passionate about helping people achieve a more balanced and healthier life. Each week, we'll deep dive into topics related to health and wealth, including retirement income planning, innovative healthcare solutions, alternative funded health plans, and specific actions individuals and business owners can take to gain control of their finances, have access to affordable quality health care, and achieve peace of mind. We'll also be joined by innovative experts who will share their knowledge and insights on prevalent topics. So, whether you're looking to grow your wealth or improve your health, you've come to the right place. Get ready to be informed, inspired, and empowered. Let's get started. Welcome again to another exciting edition of the Health and Wealth Power Hour. I am your host, Arlen Pickett. Great to have you with us today. Very interesting subjects we're going to talk about today. We're going to get things kicked off with cybersecurity. Our guest today has owned a couple of different cybersecurity companies, is definitely a professional in that world. But with everything that has happened in our healthcare industry in the last few months, and really no matter where you're at, it seems like everyone has been affected by some type of data breach, always something going on. So it's very important to make sure you protect your data, whether you're an individual, but especially if you're a company, because you're responsible for that data. In many cases, there can be some severe liabilities if you start losing other people's data and you did not take the proper steps. Once again, we found out just recently that the reason why Change Healthcare data was breached is because they didn't have something as simple as two-factor authorization. Very simple, easiest piece to put in place, and they didn't have that. And if you're asking yourself right now, what is two-factor? Then you're probably not in the best place. Two-factor authorization is a vital step. We'll talk to our guest today about not just that, but many other parts of his incredible career and background. Christian Espinosa has joined us. He is a veteran. He is a best-selling author, and he is the CEO and founder of Blue Goat. Excuse me, not Gold Goat, but Blue Goat. Where did Gold Goat even come from? Blue Goat Cyber. Also a 24-time Ironman triathlete. Woo! Man, I just didn't shiver up my spine. I'm tired already listening to myself say that. Christian, welcome aboard to the Health and Wealth Power Hour, buddy. Welcome. It's so great to have you here, man.
Awesome. It's awesome to be here, Arlen. Thank you.
So let's jump right into cybersecurity, because obviously a lot going on in that world. I'll tell you, I don't know any part of our lives that it doesn't touch right now. What are you seeing as far as trends on that side of the world?
Well, my company, Blue Goat Cyber, we focus on medical device cybersecurity. So more on the device side, which could be something like a drug infusion pump, a surgical robot, an in vitro diagnostic machine. And what we're seeing is more and more threats that are rising. The criminals are trying to make money, typically through ransomware, and they don't care what targets they hit. If there's an open vulnerability, their automatic system is going to find it and install the ransomware, and they're going to try to make the money that way. So a lot of people think they're not a target, but if you have a vulnerability, you're a target. It doesn't matter what size your business is, you're going to be a target, because the cyber criminals don't matter. To them, it doesn't matter if a small business pays them or enterprise, they're making money. So we're seeing more of that, but we're also seeing a lot of AI tools that help facilitate these attacks. A lot of email sequences are written through AI now. A lot of phone calls are using the AI bot for the criminals. And a lot of the ways to try to circumvent the defenses are using AI to try to bypass anti-malware, for instance.
Yeah, so I touched a second ago on two-factor authorization, or two-factor I'm saying that wrong there. It's two-factor. What's it called?
Authentication.
Verification. Two-factor verification. I knew I was saying the wrong thing there. Now, one of the things that I have heard people talk about recently is using what you're talking about, AI, or using actually a human calling someone and fraudulently saying, hey, I'm with XYZ, and we just sent a code to you. Can you please give me that code? What they've really done is they're trying to log into your account now, right? They've got it to the point where they're logging into your account for nefarious reasons. And because that code goes to you, they now need you to give them that code so you can get into it. As a general rule, no one will ever call you and ask for a code that is supposed to get you in. I mean, is that a fair statement, Christian?
That is a very fair statement. That would be someone trying to scam you. I mean, the whole idea with two-factor authentication is you have to have both factors, which is typically something you know, which could be your password, and something you have, which could be your cell phone, which is where the code goes to. So if somebody hacks into your account and they have your password, they may find a way to get a hold of you to get that other piece of information so they can bypass the two-factor authentication.
Okay.
Yeah, you should not pay attention to those kind of calls.
All right. So let me ask you a question, because this actually just came to mind here. There are times whenever you can choose whether to send that code to your phone or to your email. Now, if you do not have that email protected, that's probably a really bad place for it to go, because then the bad guys who have broke into your email to access something can now have access to that email, and they don't need you to get the code because it's just sending it right to them.
Yeah, the email is like the golden ticket. If I can compromise your email, then generally I can go reset all your passwords anyway and change the authentication method potentially. Yeah. So I certainly recommend something like an authenticator app. Like I use the Google Authenticator app that's on my phone. So it has a code that changes every minute. But the attacker would have to have my phone to be able to get into something.
Yeah, and because most folks that I see nowadays, anyway, used to not be quite as big a deal, but almost every phone now makes you do some type of way to get in, right? You got to have either some type of passcode, or you got to have a fingerprint, or you have Face ID. You know, it used to be you could set your phones up to bypass all of that, right? You could just pick up your phone and kind of swipe, and you didn't have to have anything. But that's really not the case anymore. Almost all of them, everything I've seen here recently, you have to set up something when you set up your phone.
Yeah, and it's a good idea to have something set up on your phone. I know a lot of people that freely give out their PIN to their phone, but it's no different than giving out the password to your computer. Your phone is a small computer with lots of information on it, including your email, all your contacts, maybe your bank information where it's easy logged on. So you need to be careful about your phone and treat it just like a laptop or something else.
Yeah,
with a PIN, a password, or some sort of authentication on it, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the phones we have today are, definitely more powerful than the computers that I had as a kid, right? I mean, it's not even close. It's very interesting how far technology has gone, which then opens up to so many other things. I could not imagine, nor I'm sure could my parents or anybody else, of banking online or using your computer to do these things. So it's crazy how far we've come down the road on that. So let's talk about specifically what you're doing over at Blue Goat, and that is medical devices. That's very interesting to me, because I don't think that I want someone controlling my mechanical surgical robot, but the people who are doing my surgery. So talk a little bit about what got you into that particular niche, and what are the fears there? Why are you in that particular space?
There's a couple reasons I'm in that space. My first cybersecurity business, we started focusing on that space. So I've got 10 years plus experience in medical device cybersecurity. The other reason that I like the space is it's very innovative and very interesting. People are coming up with new technology all the time, and that technology needs to be secure. And that technology is something that can alter, the face of humanity, basically, in our healthcare system. Like one of the companies we're working with now, they have a technology that can take your blood, basically dehydrate it, turn it into a powder, and then it's much easier to store as a powder, and then they can reconstitute it in a battlefield or a situation where they need a lot of blood. So it's very unique things. And what I like about it also is the risk is much greater. If somebody hacks into a drug infusion pump, they can increase the flow rate of morphine and kill you. If somebody hacks into a surgical robot that's performing surgery on your back, they can kill you. So the impact is a lot greater than someone stealing your health information or your credit card information. And I want to do what I can do to help the advances in healthcare keep moving forward. We don't want a cyber attack to cause everyone to freak out and not want to use an implantable device anymore, for instance.
Yeah, so it's really twofold then, right? You're protecting the actual device and I guess you can say there's a lot of technology there that has patents and is protected, but if someone was able to hack into that, they could steal that. So there's that espionage side, right? The corporate espionage of stealing those secrets. And then there's the other side of actually taking over the device and causing harm.
Yeah, so the main focus with medical devices is patient safety. The intellectual property behind the device is also something we want to protect. Whereas in healthcare, like healthcare generally speaking, we want to protect healthcare information, which doesn't have as great of an impact because it may be an inconvenience if your medical records are stolen, but it's certainly less of an inconvenience than if someone hacks into a device connected to your grandmother and kills her. Because on an average, there's 14 devices connected to a hospital bed. So a lot of those devices have had vulnerabilities in the past.
Yeah, and I mean, that's scary. Just thinking about that particular, and that is something we really don't think about. I mean, I understand what you're saying. Recently I had a procedure and I'm hooked up to all kind of stuff and I'm watching all these beeps and blips and all this stuff going on there. It's not one of those things that I think about, oh, I hope the hackers don't get that thing and do X, Y, Z. That's not, I guess I believe I always thought I'd be more concerned about them getting my medical information and, of course, then personal information and doing whatever with it. What we see on that healthcare side is people get that information or they become you, and whatever they had going on with them now is on your medical records, not theirs. So, now all of a sudden you find out you go to get yourself a life insurance policy and they say, oh, there ain't no way we're touching you. You've got all these other things going. You're like, I don't have that. I don't even know what you're talking about. Because the person that had this stuff done was an imposter. And so you had two things going on. Now it's on your medical record and the bills are coming your way too. And you've got to worry about other, and somehow you got to prove it wasn't really you. So that's what we typically hear about on the medical side. And of course, as we've heard through the Change Healthcare side, we hear what that data breach did for physicians and hospitals and such, as far as not getting payments and patients not be able to get their pharmaceuticals, their medications from the pharmacy because no one could verify benefits, and doctors not be able to verify benefits. All of these different things that happen. But this is a totally different little market here that in many ways it's even scary.
Yeah, it is scarier. And the other reason I like it from a business perspective is there's not a lot of people doing medical device cybersecurity. So it's more of a blue ocean strategy. It's hard to get into that market. There's a lot to learn, a lot to know, because you don't only have like the cybersecurity acronyms, you've got the FDA acronyms, you got regulatory acronyms, you've got all the medical device terminology. So it's a hard space to be in, but it's a less crowded space than doing, general cybersecurity for for a hospital or a doctor's office, for instance.
So let's jump back just a second to the part of that is the potential for corporate espionage, or as you were talking about, how I would think that it's very prevalent in that world because the attempts on it. I'm not saying that it happens all the time, but the attempts on it, because it is cutting edge stuff, right? We're in this world now where just one little thing that all of a sudden you've perfected that someone else hadn't can make you a billion-dollar company in a very short period of time. But everyone else wants to be that billion-dollar company too, right? There's so much there with so quickly technology is changing right now. There's got to be some crazy hoops you guys have to jump through on the NDAs and the other things just to be able to protect the stuff that you may not even know. Obviously, you don't even know all the details to it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, well, we have to analyze the source code of some of the clients we work with, and that source code is in their intellectual property. It's, their software. And in most of these medical devices, the algorithm or what makes them unique is in that code. So of course we have to go be very diligent about protecting that. And what you just mentioned is very true. There are a lot of nation states and even competition trying to steal intellectual property. Like China has stolen lots of our intellectual property, and people don't think of it in terms of economics, but it's really an economic play.
Right.
So if we, the U.S., spend $1 billion in investing in a new stealth fighter, and that's R&D, and then China can spend $1 million hiring some hackers to somehow steal the technology on a stealth fighter, they come out way ahead because now they have all the research and all the development, and they saved $999 million to obtain that technology. And now they can produce something that we produce that costs us more. And it's not just for stealth fighters, it's for anything on the market. Because you see a company that came up with a new product, it has intellectual property, all of a sudden you see the same thing exactly being sold for 1/4 of the price. That's because someone stole the technology typically. They didn't have to invest in the research or the development. They just can start mass producing it. And that's an economic play that a lot of us don't really think about. But that economic play, and as consumers in the U.S., we often want to buy the cheapest thing, but we're actually helping another country become a superpower in a lot of regard.
Yeah, that's very interesting because I think you're right. We see that more often than we probably even think about, right? Oh, wow, look, man, this is the same thing. It's such a better deal here. I'm getting it.
We like the better deal.
You're getting it from China, right? You're getting it from China, or you're getting it from North Korea, or one of these bad players that are somewhere that you would have never thought would have had it. Maybe a smaller country that's paid a bad actor, right? They've paid some third party to get this done because maybe they're not necessarily well known for that. But that's you're right. It's very interesting that you say that because it's not something that we think about too often. So you're a veteran. When you were in service, were you in this realm or were you in something else?
So I was in the military. I went to Air Force Academy and graduated in 1983. So it was quite some time ago. And then I spent 6 years active duty and got out in 1999. So I worked protecting classified data. So I was in information assurance, we called it back then. We didn't call it cybersecurity, but I was doing the same thing, but at a much different scale because not everything was interconnected as much as it is today. Things were starting to become interconnected back then, but things were a little more isolated, especially a classified network is supposed to be, separate from an unclassified network. Otherwise, you're going to have classified data spill over to the unclassified environment and vice versa. So things were different. Today, the world is drastically different than the 90s because everything is interconnected. And this is the challenge with these medical devices, like you said, you had a procedure and you have all these devices. In the past, all those devices were basically standalone, but now they're all connected, so they can pull your information from electronic medical record system, push results up there, push imaging somewhere. But this is all connected stuff. If it's all connected, that means there's a pathway for an attacker to get to it across the internet, typically, which is increases the risk.
Yeah, and we're seeing more and more remote. Yeah, I guess the best way, people are living far away. People are living in remote areas, and we're seeing more and more devices to keep up with them remotely, especially if they have things like diabetes or high blood pressure. There's monitoring. There's more and more remote monitoring that is allowed. And in some cases, like the Dexcom, which is a very popular device for folks with diabetes, it actually gives you your insulin, whatever treatments you're, when it's real time. In other words, it says, okay, you need this right now. If someone hacked that is life-threatening. Like you mentioned, that's a life-threatening situation because you're expecting this device to be doing this job for you, and it doesn't. If it doesn't, that you could literally go into diabetic shock, or you could have a terrible situation that you might not recover from.
Yeah, and that's a good use case. That device is connected to a mobile app typically, which is then connected to somewhere in the cloud. So you think about it, that cloud system is publicly accessible. Some hacker gets into that, they connect to the mobile app, take it over, and they can change the insulin amount that's given or not given. So yeah, those are the things that we ensure don't happen, because there's a lot of ways these things can happen, and most people are unaware. And we want people to not have to worry about it. We want to make sure these medical devices are secure.
Yeah, absolutely. So everyone, we're glad to be here to scare the heck out of you today. And as you're walking around with your Dexcom on, you're like, oh my God, I'm going to go back to the old days where I got my little blood strip where I take my own. And
hey, you have to understand the risk, and whatever your risk tolerance is, is what you got to be comfortable with. Because I wrote about this in my first book with implantables. Dick Cheney had a pacemaker, and he was so concerned about a cyber threat where someone could remotely connect to his pacemaker and have it shock his heart over and over and over and kill him, that he actually had his pacemaker taken out. Because when we think about an implantable device, they have to have a way to communicate where the doctor can get diagnostic data off of it. The doctor can remotely update it if necessary. That wireless connectivity is a pathway that somebody can attack the device for nefarious purposes.
Yeah, it's, once again, I've got family members that have pacemaker or other medical devices that are hooked up to them, and that's not it. And I know that they get remote data. I know they do. Right. So that's, it's something I didn't want to think about. So I really appreciate you scaring the tar out of me today, Christian. That's makes me feel so.
I'm just trying to increase your awareness. I'm not trying to scare you,
So let's think about that market that you work in. My guess is that there's not really anyone that goes into that market, not at any scalable level, that don't know about this already. So you don't have, somebody working typically, I wouldn't think, working out of their garage with bootleg medical devices that they're selling online that don't have this type of protection, because we're talking about some high dollar R&D marketable things. But there are still some bad actors in other countries that could have knockoffs of these things that may not have that protection. Is that true?
That is true. That's why in the United States, the FDA has very specific guidelines and requirements for medical devices. Like, you cannot sell a medical device in the United States unless it is FDA cleared. And this is a very laborious and time-consuming process. And they the FDA has come out with a lot more stringent cybersecurity requirements because they're very aware of the new threats and the increased risk. So you want to, if you're a healthcare delivery organization, obviously you want to buy equipment from a legitimate source that has been FDA cleared, and you can look it up on the FDA's website to make sure that this device is cleared. Otherwise, if you're going to buy bootleg, like you said, medical devices, you don't know what you're getting, and you're increasing the risk of patient harm.
Yeah, absolutely. I just couldn't help but think, oh, look, I got, my new Dexcon type thing, but it's called, Dex Pro or something like that. I bought it. Where'd you get that? I bought it on Temu.
Right.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you got you a good deal there. I'm sure the Chinese government will be happy to help you along with that particular thing. Well, I have to say that it's great talking about cybersecurity, but you also wrote a book about it. And I love the title, but I have to know why the title is this and what in the world are you getting at here? So, folks, if you haven't ever heard the title of Christian's book, it is The Smartest Person in the Room, The Root Cause and New Solution for Cybersecurity. I thought at first when I saw The Smartest Person in the Room, I thought I had an idea what it was going to be about. And then I got to the second line and I said, huh? So tell me about this book.
So the book is about my experience with my first cybersecurity company. And as an owner of a business, as the sole funder, I bootstrapped it. The lens I look at things is a lot different because I had a lot more skin in the game. And what I realized when I looked at the problems I had in my company, it was not because my staff wasn't technical enough or didn't have a high enough IQ. It was because they had a low EQ or low emotional intelligence or almost no emotional intelligence. And I started thinking back on my career in cybersecurity and in other high-tech industries. I'm an engineer. I have an engineering degree, so I've been around a lot of engineers and computer nerds and geeks in the industry. And everybody wants to be significant. And people that are attracted to high-tech industries often get their significance by this perceived intellectual superiority. And when they get their significance from that, their ego does all it can do to protect that identity they've created for themselves. So I call the book The Smartest Person in the Room because from my experience, and I used to be one of these people that always want to be the smartest person in the room and look for an opportunity to prove somebody wrong. That is the reason we're not doing well in cybersecurity. We have too many people trying to be smarter than other people, so they talk over a client's head. They don't communicate in a way the client understands how to fix something, and then internally, instead of collaborating well, they're often looking for an opportunity to point out how somebody doesn't know what they're talking about. So I feel like that's why we're losing the cyber war. And what I wrote about in the book is 7 steps that worked in my company, because I solved this challenge in my company where I raised the EQ and kept the IQ high as well. What I wrote about are the 7 steps that worked, and that's what I put in the book.
Okay, that is, man, I'll tell you, I get that very, very much. Even in our industry, I'm not saying that health insurance brokers and advisors are the smartest person in the room, but we like to act like we are, especially when it's our industry, right? I mean, it's one of those crazy things where we use this terminology and we speak over people's heads because I think that's the only time we feel like we're the smartest person in the room is when we're talking about something no one else has any idea. The problem that I see in that, and I'm sure is the same thing that you saw, people don't think you're smart then. They really don't think you're smart. They're looking at you like, really? You're trying to help me? I don't think you are trying to help me. You're just, literally, they think you're trying to look smart. Whenever, if you just talk to them in layman's terms, all of a sudden they would really have some more respect for you and really think you're smart now because you're the first one who was smart enough to talk to them as a real person and really try to help them.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
Because It is. It's so easy for us to talk round and round in our industry. I certainly can't talk in yours, but I know I got all these great, terms that I can use, abbreviations, and man, it's awesome. I'm telling you, you have no idea. Your eyes are crossed. You're like, maybe this guy knows what he's talking about. Maybe you don't. But if someone comes in behind me and actually explains all those things to that person, that's probably who's going to win that business.
Yeah, it's exact same in cybersecurity. We talk over someone's head. Instead of like taking ownership and changing how we communicate, we get frustrated and say, oh, they just didn't get it.
Yeah.
That's why they couldn't solve the problem. That's why I didn't close the deal. They just don't understand. It's like it's our job to change how we communicate, to make sure our prospect understands so we can close the deal, or our client understands so they can improve their security or, get better insurance or whatever the outcome is we're seeking. But we often just blame the other person.
Because that's the easy thing to do.
Yep.
So does your 7-step process, does that include that mindset change for the individuals that work for you? Is that part of that 7-step process?
Yes, actually, mindset is step number 2 in my 7-step process. And I advocate a growth mindset, which means you don't believe your brain is hardwired and you're capable of change, versus a fixed mindset. If you have a fixed mindset, you think you're just the way you are. You can't make any changes. You're just not good with people. You're not a good communicator. That's a fixed mindset. And that doesn't do well in my culture. I've changed. I shifted my core values to where I don't want to hire people that think their brain is hardwired and they're just the way they are. I want people that will grow and take new challenges and try to get better at things. So yeah, that is one of the steps in my book.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit, because I think that it's very important that people who believe that and it's always not just them. It's like this industry. If you work in this, you talk about being an engineer. Engineers have a certain reputation, right?
Yes.
So, but if they have a growth mindset, they can easily overcome that. If they do not, then they're just going to be an engineer, because that's the way engineers think, and there's nothing I can do about it. I'm an engineer.
Mm-hmm.
So talk a little bit about those steps, because I think that's very intriguing. And is it relational across other industries as well?
Yeah, the steps are relational across every industry. I think I wrote the steps in context of cybersecurity because that's the industry I was working in, but they can really apply to anything and anybody. So the first step is awareness, and we have to start out with self-awareness. If we're not self-aware, nothing else really matters. And I talk a lot about neuro-linguistic programming. I'm a certified neuro-linguistic programmer, basically a master practitioner. And one of the things as humans we like to think is that we're very unpredictable, whereas the reality is we're very predictable. And our brain runs a program. There's a stimulus or a trigger, we run the program. And before we know it, we've executed this program. And this could be something as simple as somebody asks you to take out the trash, you throw a fit, and all of a sudden you're in an argument, for instance. It doesn't matter what the stimulus is or the program. But at the end of the day, we have to have the awareness to say, is this program I'm running by default actually serving me? Is it helping in my health, my wealth, my relationships, anything, right? And if it's not, we have to have the awareness to say, okay, when I hear this trigger and I respond this way, maybe I should take a moment and respond a little bit differently and install basically a new default behavior, which over time will become the new default behavior because it'll build a stronger neural pathway in your brain, and the old one will dwindle away. It's a simple thing to understand, but it's not easy to implement. So that's the first thing, is to understand that we have patterns, and often those patterns don't serve us, those default behaviors, but we can change those. And the second thing is mindset, like I talked about, because if we don't have a growth mindset, we're not going to be able to change those patterns. And the third step is acknowledgement. And this includes like self-acknowledgement. I think if we're going to make changes, we have to have some gratitude and value the journey and the progress. For me, as a leader, it's something I've always struggled with. I'm much better now, but I remember like 2005, for instance, we talked about Ironman triathlon. In 2005, I went to the Ironman World Championship. The first time I ever went there, it was in Hawaii. I stood under the finish line and someone took a picture of me. And I told myself, one of these freaking days, I'm going to do this race. So 10 years later, in 2015, I finished the race. I was running in the Ironman. And I never took one moment to like acknowledge myself. I was automatically thinking about the next big thing to accomplish. And I realized, man, if I can acknowledge something that took me 10 years to do, I'm probably doing a pretty piss poor job acknowledging my staff or my partner or anybody in my life. So that's something I work to change. The step 4, we talked a little bit about this, it's communication. And I'm a proponent that the meaning of communication is the response you get. So if you're not getting the response you desire, maybe it's closing a deal, maybe it's getting a budget from the board of directors, the ownership shifts back to you to alter how you communicate. And like we alluded to before, we often just blame the other people for not getting it. We blame the board of directors for not giving us a budget, because they didn't understand what we're talking about. But that's a flawed approach because it's very circumstantial. We have the ability to alter how we communicate. And I think that's extremely important. And then the 5th step is monotasking. So monotasking is the opposite of multitasking. Multitasking makes you very busy, but not very productive. Multitasking also makes you a horrible friend or horrible partner because you're always looking at your phone while you're at dinner with someone versus actually being present with them. So if you learn to monotask, which is doing one thing for a certain period of time, it could be an hour. You only work on one thing, like you don't do anything else, but work on that one thing. Like for me, if I'm working on my next book, for the hour, that's all I do. I don't check Slack. I don't check my phone. I don't answer my phone. I just do that one thing. If I'm out to dinner with my girlfriend, I just pay attention to her, and I'm not on my phone. I see too many people at dinner, and there's a couple sitting there, and they're both on their phone. They're not even talking to each other. I'm like, what was the point of even going to dinner? It doesn't make the other person feel valued if you're immediately on your phone versus listening to their conversation or what they have to say. So that's monotasking. Step 6 is empathy. Today in our society, probably nobody has empathy because there's all this division going on. There's the Democrats, the Republicans, the pro-vax, the anti-vax, the pro-gun, anti-gun. It's like we always focus on the differences. And if we see a fellow human as a different segment of society, it's hard to be empathetic. With me, I had a pretty good example of this is I had blood clots a couple years ago, and I almost died from the blood clots. But I went to the emergency room because my leg started hurting super badly, and a friend of mine made me promise I'd go to the emergency room. I don't like hospitals, but I went anyway. And I had a test done, and the doctor came out and said I had 6 blood clots in my left leg. It wasn't just one, is freaking 6. And I don't know what that means. I've never had a blood clot before. I thought I was healthy. I didn't think things like this happened to people like me. I had done 24 Ironmans. I worked out all the time. So I asked him what it meant. And he said, it means you can have a stroke or die at any second. So I'm kind of freaking out at the hospital by myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not like a pleasant thing to say to somebody. I'm there by myself. My nearest family member is like in Denver, and I was in St. Louis at the time. And I'm thinking, man, is my life over? Like images of my life start going through my head. Like, did I screw it up? Did I do a good job? Did I live a good life? Did I love? Did I ultimately matter? And I started crying because I was like, man, I don't know what's going to go on here, if I'm going to die or what, because pretty bad news. And the doctor, I think in an attempt to be empathetic, he said, don't worry. He kind of said it in a dismissive way, like, don't worry, I see this all the time. And it kind of like snapped me out of like my tears. And I got kind of mad. I'm like, you know what, dude, I don't see this all the time. This is a first for me.
Right.
And I
Right.
think from an empathy perspective, he saw himself as a doctor. He saw me as a patient versus, and he was just delivering the news, versus seeing me as a fellow human being that was receiving something kind of serious or pretty serious, right? It's like, being told you could die at any moment is pretty serious news. And if I think he would have looked at it from that perspective, he may have changed his delivery. But again, it's that divide. It's like, I'm this role, you're that role, and it's hard to be empathetic when you have that division. And the final step is Kaizen. Kaizen is a Japanese word that means continuous and never-ending improvement. The whole idea with any of these steps and in life in general is mastery over something takes time. And as long as we're making progress, that's what matters. And sometimes to get better at something, we're actually going to get worse for a while. And Tiger Woods is a good example of this. He was being told how to hold the club for a while. So because he was doing it in a way that was less efficient for him. So he actually got worse at golf for a while, but then he got much better. But he stuck it out because we have to realize if we're going to progress, there's going to be some valleys. But as long as the trajectory is heading up over time, that's what matters. And I think a lot of people that are looking at these steps, that they want to improve their communication, for instance, if they don't see improvement within a couple of days, they just give up. Whereas Kaizen, it takes time. Most of us underestimate what we can do in 3 years and grossly overestimate what we can do in 1.
I think that is an absolutely true statement. This is why diets don't work too. This is why, so many things, right? I mean, this is why so many habits that you want to change don't work. And also why people look for the easy method. I want the easy button. I don't want to have to work hard for something because it never works for me. But I want to go back to monotasking because in today's society, that is almost impossible to get anyone to do. I'm not saying you can't do it, but I mean, I noted in my family, come on, guys, let's not have our iPad or our phone or our whatever with us. Let's pay attention to even just sit down and have dinner. Let's put these things away. And, as an entrepreneur, there's no doubt, and, I've got a team, but we're not giant. Any phone call could be extremely important. But so is my mental health. so is my family, right? So is that time that I need to disconnect, even if it's just for a meal, to be able to have conversations with my family that are uninterrupted. And I think people do not put enough emphasis on that nowadays. And the other part of what you talked about is as a business owner, how often do we not get anything done because we're doing too many things? Everything distracts us from something else. I'm going to give an hour to my emails, except for 5 minutes into it, my phone rings. Except for 10 minutes into it, I get a Slack. Except for, right? And then all of a sudden, you've got all these other things going on, and your hour of emails is up, and you've done 2.
Yeah.
Or you've got to where you finally deleted all the ones that you didn't care about, your spam stuff or your whatevers, and now you're actually to the emails you needed to address, and you ain't got to any of them yet. I find myself get caught in that trap sometimes as well because of not monotasking. So that's a very, very good point. I mean, all of these are great. I think of the ones that I have the most difficulty with, and I will promise you that monotasking is one of the biggest challenges that I face personally.
Yeah, it's not an easy thing to do. We've sort of been brainwashed to multitask. And like from a productivity point of view, monotasking definitely helps. I mean, I noticed my productivity go up a lot once I started monotasking. Otherwise, what I noticed before I started monotasking is I'd be very busy. At the end of the day, I would kind of exhale and go, okay, whew, and then go to sleep. Next day, do it all over again. And then I'm looking, wow, I didn't move the needle on anything. I just somehow got sucked away into all this stuff. So now I like write down the top 2 things I want to get done, put the time blocks in my calendar and work on those things, the things that will move the needle. And, it's just a change of habit. And then I'm also a believer in society that we get what we tolerate. So with my girlfriend, for dinner, we have a rule where we're not going to be on our cell phone. If I'm talking to her, she gets on her phone, I just stop talking, because it makes me feel like what I'm saying is not as valid as, a new Facebook post or some garbage like that. It's like, who cares, Like you're actually with somebody in person, not somebody from high school 30 years ago that posted something on Facebook, And I think we've just sort of tolerated, like our kids that TikTok is more important than like an actual interaction with the family, for instance. And then we should stop tolerating this and kind of rewind it, because I think it's really detrimental to our society, actually.
I agree with you 100%. And I think it's affected mental health, in my opinion. I think it's affected mental health dramatically in this country as well. I don't think that some of the younger folks, including my daughter in particular, my son's as well adjusted as any of us crazy people are, but as far as knowing how to make friends, knowing how to interact with somebody, they didn't do it. My daughter's kind of a COVID kid too. Her last 2 years of high school were COVID. So she didn't have really a lot of interaction then. And it's kind of carried over into even her first 2 years of college, where those interactions with people are hard all of a sudden. It's almost like everyone was deprogrammed from anything they did younger in life, but all they do now is stare at their phones. And we've had multiple conversations about it. And she says, it's hard to strike up a conversation with someone at school when everyone just walks around like this, when everyone walks around looking down at their phone.
Yeah.
You have a conversation with someone like that. And I don't know the answer. I mean, I'm going to be honest, Christian, I don't know the answer, because I didn't have to deal with that when I was younger, right? I don't deal with it. I'm more like you. If someone's got their head down looking at that, I'm just moving on to talk to somebody else. I mean, they clearly don't want to talk to me if I'm in the middle of a conversation and they start looking down at their phone. That's okay, but I'm moving on. But I think it's been very detrimental to our country. I agree with you with that.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Like if you're in college or you're trying to make friends and everyone around you is, got text neck because they're looking down all the time. There's this epidemic where the people's necks are getting screwed up. Then, how do you interrupt somebody? And we've been brainwashed to also think the phone is a priority over a real conversation. Like, all I got to do is pull out my phone and go, oh, sorry, I don't want to interrupt you. Like, come on, But I look out here, I'm in Phoenix, I see people walking their dogs. It is beautiful out here, like by the lake and stuff. And almost everybody has their dog leash in one hand, their cell phone in the other, and they're just looking down, almost bumping into other people. The dog is like about to get run over by a bicycle. It's like they're not even present, It's crazy. And I think what you said with your daughter, it makes me sad, because even if you want to make friends, how do you make friends if no one is appearing like open to a conversation? And that is just dwindling the emotional intelligence even more of people as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because she's like, we'll go into, one of the lounge areas, and everyone's just sitting there either on a computer or on a phone. No one's talking. You go into their coffee shop. She said, now and then you'll have a couple of people talking. Maybe they're studying together. But as a general rule, everyone's just sitting there by themselves looking at some device. And that's crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah, I was watching a TED Talk a couple of days ago, and the guy was advocating for like universities and classrooms in areas like coffee shops to be like cell phone free zones because of this exact thing you're talking about. It's it's also affecting like, if you can't make friends, you're probably not going to have a hard time making finding a partner, which means we're probably not going to have children, which means we're going to have an issue later when people our age or older. There's not going to be enough people to take care of us, because there's not going to be enough nurses, not going to be enough plumbers, not going to be enough anybody. And people don't think about that. We just think we're going to have too many people on the planet, but it's actually the opposite. Elon Musk talks about this quite a bit, because our older generations isn't going to have enough wait staff in the restaurant or nurses or anybody. It's just this crazy scenario where we're sort of putting ourselves in it too.
It really is. Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, I read the data that in 2023, for the first time in a long time, decades, that our the United States birth rate went down. It went down. Now, I'm not saying it was lower than it was in 1970, but for the first time in decades, it had a negative trend downward instead of upward, which it had in every other year since that they were keeping the data back then. So is that an indicator of that? I don't know, but I will say that there is zero doubt that there's been huge changes in the way people interact since COVID. I think it started before then, but COVID certainly pushed it quicker, where it made it okay not to interact with people. It's almost like some people needed an excuse. Yeah, all right, I've got the free pass. I don't have to interact with anybody anymore. Yes, this is my time.
Yeah, there's great people out there. There's a guy at this complex I'm at, where my condo is, and I walked by him one day. I'm a pretty friendly guy. I look somebody in the eye and say, "Hey man, how's it going?" He looked me straight in the eye and looked the other way. I'm like, and didn't say anything. It's like kind of pissed me off. I'm thinking, what is wrong with you, dude? But like, how hard is it just to be nice to someone?
Yeah.
Like, you can smile at someone and make their day, and your smile is free to give to somebody. But this guy chose the opposite. And maybe it's because, like you said, COVID gave him an excuse just to be, kind of dismissal to everybody, because
how dare you get people.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a weird time to be alive, brother. It's a weird time.
Yeah, I find myself
who like interacting with people, right? Especially those of us who enjoy that, who would love to, I'll leave my phone at home. How about that? Let's all go somewhere and leave our phones at home. Like in the old days, I can't remember. We went somewhere here a few months ago and I forgot my phone at home, and it was the greatest 6 hours I've had, and I can't tell you how long.
Yeah, that's awesome. People should do that more often. Like, can you actually go 6 hours without your phone? Most people wouldn't be able to do it for 6 hours.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. We were, 30 minutes from home. I think, do we need to go back home? I'm like, no, it'll be all right. It was beautiful. It was the greatest half day I've had in years, because there was nothing I could do. It was gone. It was okay. It was a beautiful thing.
We removed a lot of stress. Yeah.
It did.
Oh, a text message I can respond to. Yeah.
Once I got over it, right? Once I got over it and said, well, there's nothing I can do about it, it'll be fine. Then it didn't stress me out at all at that. I think I had some stress right there at first, because we're all addicted to these damn things, right? I think I had some stress right there at first, but then when I realized there's nothing I can do about it, and it's going to be okay. There's nothing that's going to happen here. If it's a family emergency, they'll call my wife.
Yeah.
Right? I'm still reachable for a family emergency. But if it's work or it's something else, I'll catch y'all later. Yeah, I think I had 20 missed calls and 80 missed text messages and all that when I got home. But I lived through it. It was okay. It was a wonderful.
You survived.
I did. I survived. And I'm thinking about, I have forgot it a few more times intentionally. And I've told my wife I was going to the store. I'm like, don't try to call me. I'm not taking the phone. I'm just going to go to the store. Just be gone for an hour or two,
It's almost unheard of to do that these days.
It is, but it just makes you breathe a little bit better. In my case, sometimes I just need that break, and I like that. I like to disconnect when I can. It's not like you can find too many places where you can disconnect because there's no service anymore.
That's right. That's right.
There's still a few, but they're hard to find nowadays. When my kids were younger, probably 15-ish years ago, my parents took them up to Big Bend, which is way in West Texas, and they stayed at the Indian Lodge. There's what they call it, and there was no TVs. And I thought both of my kids were going to have a heart attack. My parents was talking about how funny it was when they went into the room and they're like, "There's no TV." Well, we got the wrong room. There's something I don't know what's happened here, because they were too young to either one actually have phones way back then. Most kids weren't, but we didn't let our kids have them when they were little. But anyway, it was still one of those funny things where they thought that no TV, that has to be a horrible mistake. What kind of place have we stayed?
Yeah, how happy you go through a day without a television? Big Ben's awesome. I've been there before. It's kind of remote. I stayed at an off the grid place pretty close to there. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm not going to keep you a whole lot longer, but I do want to touch on something that you mentioned earlier, and that is the very first thing you did as an Ironman triathlete is you just took a picture underneath the finish line before you actually ever competed, and it took you 10 years to do that. Was it always on your mind as something that you wanted to do? Were you waiting for a sign from God to say, go ahead, it's all right now? Why the 10 year? That kind of shocked me when you said that earlier. Why the 10 years between taking the picture and actually completing your first one?
So I completed quite a few before the 10 years.
Okay.
The one I went to where I stood at the finish line is the Ironman World Championship. So you have to qualify. It's very difficult to qualify.
Okay.
And I'm a little bit slow in Ironman. I'm not like super fast. So the way I had to qualify was to complete 12 Ironmans and enter a lottery. And then, if you completed 12 and you entered the lottery, there's a small pool of people they gave the race to if you didn't qualify by being like first in your age group. So I did the lottery twice. In the second year, I got the slot.
All right.
But I had to race. You had to do those 12 Ironmans before I could even enter the lottery. So it was quite the journey. And before that, I had done quite a few like half Ironmans and quarter distance Ironmans and, kind of got into the culture. But yeah, it just took me a lot of 2 lottery tries and then 12 Ironmans before I could even like qualify, basically.
Okay. All right. So I got the misconception there through my lack of understanding that it was the same. Your very first one was, but yeah, I do remember you saying it was the World Championship. So you had to actually do all those things to be able to cross that finish line.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You can't just enter that race. You have to qualify for it. So
yeah, I've talked to other folks that have done Ironman, and that moving slow, or that, completing it, but doing it slowly, kind of at a slower pace, appears to be something they're not fond of. The actual race themselves, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've done some Ironmans where I've been in great shape, and some where I've been on the side of the road throwing up, and I had pretty much everything happen. But the ones I've been in the worst shape that have taken me the longest have hurt the most because it's painful. The big difference in finishing in 12 hours versus 16 hours. There's 4 more hours out there in the sun, and it's a lot longer day. So yeah, the more prepared you are, like anything in life, the funner the activity is.
Yeah,
I can persevere, but it's going to hurt if I'm not training that well.
All right, so I want to talk about one other thing before I'll let you go, and that is your other book. And I thought it was a very interesting story of how you lived your life in the macro at big steps, and you kind of had a little bit of a journey, a situation that occurred with you, that you began to appreciate the small moments. And so the name of your book is The In-Between, Life in the Micro. So talk a little bit about that journey and then why you felt compelled to write that book as well.
So I do a lot of reflection on my life, and I had already decided to write a second book. I had several topics, and this topic was solidified with a car wreck I witnessed. But the whole point of the book is, for people like me, or maybe just me, I don't know, I've been hyper-focused on this macro goal, this big thing, like, training and finishing an Ironman. And I've been so hyper-focused on that the things between where I am and that big goal, these micro moments along the way, I've kind of like skipped over or didn't show up the right way. So, relationships fell apart. My money disappeared, or whatever. I've ignored the small things that actually matter. Life is a collection of small moments. So it's really a focused memoir about where I've got it right and where I've got it wrong. Like where I feel like I did a good job balancing going after the big goal and what's right in front of me, and where I've done a horrible job. Like there's been relationships where I pretty much ignored the relationship because I was focused on building my business, and the relationship fell apart. So it cost me someone I love because I was hyper-focused on that macro goal. And yeah, it's transformative to me to have finished the book and to go through that exercise. And hopefully anybody reads it is transformative to them as well.
Yeah, so it's truly a stop and smell the roses, right? It is don't forget that day to day and that long-term goals. I think people do the other thing too, right? You have other people that just live in the moment and have a hard time. I mean, we do. We if we don't know people, we've heard of people that they just live in the moment. They cannot focus on even a goal a year down the road. And that's a whole different situation because they can't achieve big goals because those little things, every little thing that they do, just, kind of like we talked about earlier with not being able to focus on something. And in the kind of world that we live in now, they're constant multitaskers and they just simply cannot focus on one thing to achieve a certain goal. So there's the opposite.
It's a balance. I'm not advocating, just spending your whole day every day running around smelling the roses. It'd be a moment. It's showing up with some intention in those micro moments. Also, like it could be something as simple as going to dinner with your partner or your spouse or whatever, or friend. If you go to dinner and you set the intention that, if it's my girlfriend, for instance, that I want to have a great evening, if I set that intention and hold that vision, that whatever happens at that dinner, like say the waiter spills some iced tea on me or messes the order up, I'm not going to let that circumstance derail the evening. So it's also about having some intention behind those micro moments, because otherwise it's too easy to be overcome by circumstance.
No, I understand exactly. And I wasn't trying to short sell that. I think it's very important what you were saying. To have a big goal is very important, but if everything you focus on in your life is to have that big goal and you go through that time period achieving it without any intention or any enjoyment or any living life, then what are you really doing?
Yeah. And I've done that before. I've achieved something major, and at the end of the day, I was by myself because anyone that was in my life, I kind of cut them loose for the sake of this goal, and it wasn't very fulfilling. It's like, okay, now what? Now I guess I go on to the next goal, but I want to do it differently. I want to do it with people I love and care about, and and have a great journey along the way. Because I could die halfway to that goal, and if I am miserable along the way, the goal is irrelevant.
Right. Well, both of your books are available on Amazon. Okay, so folks, you can go out and learn more about those books and get access to them also on Christian's website, which is christianespinosa.com, conveniently enough. You also can learn about some other things he's got going on. There's his blog is out there as well as a lot of great information that you can see about Christian himself. Also, if someone is interested in learning more about you, or maybe having come out to be a speaker, they can contact you through that way as well. Correct, Christian?
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. All right, man, I really do appreciate you being with us today. Folks, this gentleman right here, he knows a lot about a lot. So if you would like to reach out to him, you can buy that book, or once again, you can go out to christianespinosa.com, learn more about him, and contact him there as well. Once again, Christian, appreciate you being with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Harlan. Enjoyed the conversation.
Yes, I did too, sir. Very, very much so. All right, gang, we appreciate you being with us for this episode of the Health and Wealth Power Hour. Don't forget about some of the other events that we have monthly. Last Tuesday of every month, you can join us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Simulcast Why does healthcare suck? That's right. Why does healthcare suck? Our monthly deep dive into all things healthcare, what's going on in the industry, and how you can avoid some of the pitfalls out there and actually good quality healthcare at a fair, affordable rate. We had a great time here a couple of months ago talking about all the nutsy industry jargon that we use with Doug Geinzer. He has a great book out there called Geek Speak. Don't forget, you can go out to our Eagle Care Health website, go out to the website and request one of those Geek Speaks, and we'll send one to you. Whether you're an employer or an advisor, love to share that with you. You'll have a great laugh on looking at all the crazy things that we've come up with in our industry that we hope will confuse you. That's what it seems like anyway. No, we really try to clear it up to make it a lot easier. So next time your broker's talking to you, you can know what it means, and you'll shock the heck out of him because he'll say, well, how did you know that? Then also, of course, if you want to listen to other episodes of the Health and Wealth Power Hour, you can go out to hwpowerhour.com. That's hwpowerhour.com. Subscribe right there. And don't forget to listen weekly to the Kickstart every Monday morning, 10:30 a.m. Central Time. We do a Kickstart of local industry news and trends across everything in the healthcare world. You can catch that once again on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube. Thanks again for being with us, and we'll catch you next time on the Health and Wealth Power Hour. We are out of here.